All right. Well, as folks join us from the waiting room and join the webinar today, I'm gonna get us started. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Lindsay Telfer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a manager of capacity development for the Green Municipal Fund's Net Zero Acceleration team. I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we dive in, there's a few housekeeping items to get through. Today's event will be taking place in English with French interpretation available. To join the French interpretation, you can click on the interpretation button in the lower right-hand side of your screen. It's a little globe icon. You can also follow French slides by selecting the slides button at the top of your screen and select the screen titled Présentation en français, French slides. Aujourd'hui, la discussion se fera en anglais. Si vous souhaitez écouter en français, veuillez cliquer sur le bouton d'interprétation en bas à droite de votre écran. C'est un petit globe et sélectionnez le canal français. Vous pouvez également suivre le dispositif en français en sélectionnant le bouton en haut de l'écran intitulé Présentation en français, French slides. If you need any help with any of that, please do post your questions in the chat. As we move through the presentation and discussion today, we are going to ask that you submit your questions in the Q&A box specifically. We'll respond to the questions in a few ways throughout our session. First will be via direct written response in that Q&A box itself. So certainly follow that Q&A box and see if your question has had a response. We'll also answer some questions, particularly if they're regarding a clarification to the demonstration that we're going to be going through. And we'll try to do those in real time without disrupting the flow of our presentation too much. We are also going to have some time for discussion, reflection, and discussion at the end of the webinar. So there will be a chance for us to explore some of the bigger picture questions that may emerge at that time. We do also encourage wide use of the chat box, so please do introduce yourself in the chat, have discussions. If there's reflections throughout the webinar that you want to share with other participants, please do use that chat box throughout. And as I said, to kickstart that discussion, I invite you all to introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know where you're joining us from today. And as you do that, I'm going to continue a little bit with our introduction. I am joining you all today from the beautiful shores of Lake Couchiching and Lake Simcoe in what we refer to as present-day Orillia, Ontario. It's situated on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, specifically the Chippewa-Vrama First Nation, who's a member of the Chippewa Tri-Council and Three Fires Confederacy. Our FCM office is located in Ottawa, Ontario, which is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nations, who we here at FCM recognize as the traditional custodians of this land. And we deeply appreciate their historic connections to this place, along with the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and all First Nations, both in shaping and strengthening our communities and the country as a whole. As we give this land acknowledgement, it's also important to connect reconciliation to the discussion that we're having this afternoon. And there's no doubt that land use decision-making, sustainability, and reconciliation all go hand in hand. And so we invite you to reflect on reconciliation and what it means to our land use decisions in our communities, and how impacted rights holders as Indigenous communities in our area may be to those decisions, and how we can include them as a component of decision making. It also behooves me on the to mention really quickly off the bat, we're on the eve of a major climate event happening on our continent. And just moments before joining the webinar, I was connecting with some dear friends of mine who are in Florida on the ground, really living the impacts of land use and land use decision making in real time. And so I just want to take a minute and recognize those communities who are struggling in the aftermath of Hurricane Milton today. With that, again, I've seen some of those introductions coming through in the chat. That's great to see where you're all joining us from. Please do keep them coming and keep that conversation flowing throughout our conversation. today. A really quick bit about the Green Municipal Fund. We work daily to accelerate transformations to resilient net zero communities. We do this through our unique blend of funding and capacity building programming. GMF specifically manages approximately $2.4 billion in programs funded by the Government of Canada. Today, we're excited to announce the suite of new tools that we've launched in partnership with Sustainability Solutions Group and the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The first is a guide offering best practices and strategies that lock in the positive fiscal and climate effects that we can have with good land use decisions. It also features some case studies, links to helpful resources, and a detailed comparison of the implications of 3 different types of land use developments. The second is our land use impact calculator, which we will explore in detail this afternoon. This tool can allow local governments to explore the potential impacts of different land use projects in their community. Users can explore potential land use scenarios and their impacts by inputting data that's related to your buildings, your services, infrastructure, transportation, and your municipal revenue sources. The more data you have to input, the more customized the analysis will be to your realities. And this tool is all designed with an eye to help you answer the questions that are needed to make those effective land use decisions. I am pleased to welcome our speakers from Sustainability Solutions Group this afternoon. Jeremy Murphy, who's principal with Sustainability Solutions Group, and Noah Purvis-Smith, who's a senior modeler and senior application developer for Sustainability Solutions Group. Welcome to you both. As a climate change consultancy, SSG helps create decarbonized, equitable, healthy communities for everyone. Its unique model as a workers' cooperative means on top of their deliverables to communities across Canada, Latin America, and the United States, they prioritize providing meaningful work for their members who are owners and demonstrate how a democratic business model can thrive. So again, thank you both for joining us. Before we get into the content, I just want to help us all wrap our head around the content for this afternoon's webinar. So now that we've started to use the webinar chat to introduce ourselves, I'm going to invite us to go to it again. And the question that I invite you to answer in a sentence or two is, what are the biggest challenges that your community faces in balancing development needs and environmental sustainability? So again, I'm going to leave that question up. NIMBY, thank you, Angel. As your answers to these kickoff questions kind of start to filter in, I want to set up our introduction to the demonstration of the land use impact calculator. At the Green Municipal Fund, we wanted to support this tool as we often get asked for input and suggestions on the business case for making more energy efficient, sustainable, and equitable land use decisions at that local level. This type of tool can really help us understand the different costs and benefits of scenarios, different investment priorities, and for modeling the impact that different transitions and community-wide transitions might have on our community. And we're certainly seeing some of that emerge in the chat as well. In the webinar reminders, you would have received more detailed instructions on accessing the tool. Instructions for accessing the tool are also going to be here on the screen for a few minutes. We built this tool as an add-in to a standard Excel spreadsheet. And our thinking here is that this approach would have the broadest accessibility. Now we know that some of you may have firewalls blocking add-in technologies for Excel add-ins, and we want to be able to help you and your IT departments troubleshoot any of those that may emerge. So if you're in this boat or you find that you're in this boat, please do reach out to us and we can help troubleshoot getting you access. Jeremy, as folks are accessing the tool and talking in the chat here, I'd like to hand it over to you to give us a bit of an introduction on the tool, what it is, how it can be used, and how it's an important tool in the municipal toolbox. So Jeremy, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Lindsay. So in the work that we do at Sustainability Solutions Group, we're often contributing to land use plans, to official community plans, master development plans, that sort of thing. Um, and our message in a lot of these planning efforts is that land use planning is climate change planning. They go hand in hand, they're the same thing. As you make decisions about your current and future land use, you are locking in decisions for decades. And a lot of those decisions are creating reliance on fossil fuel use. So for transportation, for home energy systems. So this tool will hopefully um, provide a means of comparing different scenarios for land use development, housing propositions, and help municipalities navigate the energy and emissions and also financial impacts of those decisions. Um, the different things that the tool considers, different development models, so different layouts of development. It has housing archetypes within it. It has different infrastructure archetypes within it, different transportation considerations, different transportation modes, and all of the energy and emissions, energy use and emissions productions from all of these different systems. Along with that, it also has a financial calculation that accompanies the construction of these systems, the infrastructure that supports them, as well as the revenue components of finances in terms of development costs and taxation revenues. So these are all part of the tool. The tool is a high level tool, so it's not like a feasibility study level tool, I would say, but it's more of a high level tool for urban planners or urban staff, city staff to assess land use decisions. Thanks. So the tool foundation of the tool kind of operates on three different land use archetypes, which are represented by these three examples here. We have one in Olympic Village in Vancouver, one in Côte Sainte-Catherine in Montreal, and one in Evergreen, Calgary. These are good archetypes of kind of a dense urban form, a transit-oriented design urban form, and a low density or suburban urban form. So these are the default archetypes that are set up in the tool, and we kind of have a couple different variations on each of these archetypes. But as you'll see as we use the tool, as we go through the options, the assumptions and input options, we can modify these archetypes to suit a specific proposed development or investigation, land use investigation that you're undertaking. But broadly speaking, these are the three types of archetypes that the tool uses. So in terms of the emissions that are considered within the tool, we have kind of three main sectors. We have housing, transportation, and then infrastructure. And so the housing emissions from housing includes the materials used in the homes, so the embedded or embodied or upfront emissions. It includes energy consumption emissions, and the emissions profile of a house is assigned depending on the type of housing specified. So we have single detached homes, we have row and town homes, and we have apartment buildings. Then for transportation, we have fuel consumption from transit and personal vehicles. We also have inputs for active transportation, walking, biking, rolling, etc. And then for the infrastructure, we have embedded emissions from different types of roads, sidewalks, and the support infrastructure like water provision and wastewater pipes. So that is all included. We can go to the next slide. So for costs, all of the same sectors, plus one additional sector for the services, the community services that are provided. These are in different units. So for housing, we have energy costs, we have taxes and development fees that are included in there. And the construction costs are on a dollar per meter squared basis. Similarly, for the infrastructure, dollar per meter squared basis when it comes to things like roads, dollar per meter when it comes to things like water and wastewater infrastructure. And we include usage fees in the financial calculations there. For transportation, it's fuel consumption. And for the community services, these are things like schools, fire departments, police departments. These are on a cost per household basis. So as we'll see as we go through the tool demonstration, all of these financial considerations are in the tool, and you can specify your municipal or regional precise values for these as well. Okay, do we have one more slide? We don't.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeremy. And I think now there's no better way to learn than dive right into the tool itself. And so Noah, over to you to walk us right through how do we use this tool? What is it going to give us?
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay and Jeremy. Can people see my screen? Just want to make sure it's
Yes, yes, we do see.
broadcasting. Okay. Um, so yes, I have the pleasure of guiding us through a little bit of the use of the tool. And so at this point, we're assuming that people have already had the chance to install it. And if not, you can follow the links that are in the chat there. But so I've got it installed here. It goes on this right-hand side of my Excel window. And when you first install it, it comes up with a series of tutorial slides that basically give some context around what the tool is for and how you could use it. I'm going to skip those because we're going to walk through that. One little tidbit, and it's going to remind you also, but you can actually make this panel wider. Excel gives a sort of a default size, but we can make it wider, which will be a little bit easier for us to work with it. So I'm going to just drag it a bit wider. So this screen here we call the dashboard. And up on the top right, there's this sort of 3-dot menu. And so in there, we can find the dashboard. I can go back and launch those tutorial slides again at any time. I can go to a help, which is, again, it's going to launch the tutorial, but also gives a chance if you're having any trouble or noticing a bug, you can fill out this form and send it, and that will come directly to us at SSG and FCM, and we can address any of those concerns. There's a little about page that just confirms what version number you're using and a background of how the tool was developed. And finally, the tool is available in both English and French, and you can toggle between the two by choosing the language there. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard, and I'm going to guide us through the creation of a few scenarios. And so today, I think we have time. We'll build about 6, and that's going to allow us to compare some different neighborhood types. We'll look at different transit options, and then hopefully, if we still have time, we'll look at what some different housing densities might offer. So for starters, I'm going to just go ahead and create a new scenario. So when I create a scenario, it comes up with this with this sort of wizard interface. I wonder if I'm going to shrink my ribbon bar there too to give a bit more screen space. Okay, so we've got this wizard interface, and it's going to guide us through all these steps. So we're going to look at this basic scenario information. What are we going to call it? Some background information about it. And then these are the components Jeremy talked about. We're going to look at the buildings, the services, the infrastructure, transportation, and finally municipal revenue associated with this scenario. So the first scenario I want to do is we're going to do a low density baseline scenario. So this is going to be all single detached homes, and no transit, no active transit, no active transport, and baseline building code. So what I'm entering here is really just metadata for our own information, this description. Now I'm going to choose the province where this is being built. And by choosing the province, that's going to help the tool know the baseline emissions factors, particularly for electricity grid. So today I'm going to choose Ontario. And what year are we going to build this? So I'm going to just go ahead and enter 2030. The next step is to choose the neighborhood type. So we've got a variety of low density, transit-oriented design, and urban infill. And if I choose any of these, it gives a little preview of here of what that might entail. So we've got low density, and we'll build some different ones of these as we go. So I'll just go with low density version 1 and hit next. So now we're on to the buildings panel. And there's a little info button on each of these modules. I can click it and it's going to bring up references related to some of the inputs on this panel. If there's any specific references or assumptions that have going into things. But you can see it came up with 700 dwellings. I'm actually going to change that today, and I'm saying I'm going to do 300 units here. Now I want to know what building code we're going to use, and we said this is going to be a baseline. So just our typical, Canadian building code. And it's already giving us an assumption then of what the average energy use intensity is for that type of building. And I have to tell it what the energy sources that are going to power these homes are going to be. I'm going to say it's going to be a mixture of natural gas and grid electricity. So I'm going to put 80% natural gas, 20% electricity, and hit next. So now I'm on to the services panel. And again, I can click here and see some of the background assumptions and references, gives me a link to look up more information if I need. So here it's got an assumed number of students based on how many dwellings we're putting in, and capital cost intensity for schools. So how many dollars per student does it cost to build schools, and then for maintenance to maintain. Similarly, we've got police and fire services and waste and recycling. And in this case, we're assuming we're not adding a new waste facility, but we're adding more usage to that facility. And I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the defaults for this panel. The next panel that I've got is infrastructure. So here we want to know how much, basically linear features that we're building. So we're gonna build some road, we're gonna build some pipe. Let's say we're actually gonna do 2,000 meters or 2 kilometers of 2-lane road. I'll stick with the default, but your transportation or construction department might have different numbers for you to put in there. And 4-lane road, we'll keep it at the 1,000. And in this case, the defaults in the tool have 0 for sidewalk, and they actually assume that the cost of sidewalk is built in to the cost of roads. but you could, again, you could alter that to whatever your needs are. Bike lane, we're actually going to set that to 0. And water pipe, since we have a total of what we had 2,000 2-lane and 1,000, let's make sure we have enough pipe to go the same length as the road. So I'll do 3,000 meters of pipe and 3,000 meters of wastewater. So that's my infrastructure. I'm going to click next. Now we're on to transportation. So wants to know, we're trying to figure out basically our energy use and emissions related to transport. So we've got personal use vehicles. I'm going to stick with the default that it gives of 20,900 vehicle kilometers traveled per household or dwelling per year. And let's say we've got mostly gasoline vehicles and we've got a few EVs coming on too. So let's put 95% gasoline and 5% grid electricity. And we've got transit, but we said actually this community is not going to have any transit. It's going to be all personal use vehicles, no active transportation and no transit. And development charges, let's say we're going to have fees of $1,500 for each new home, and they're going to have $3,000 a year of taxes on average. And that's it. Those are all my inputs. So now I'm going to save to the worksheet. And there we go. It's created a number of sheets for us. This first sheet here is basically all of the things we entered, and it's calculated some stuff for us. So we've got, our meta information up here, got our inputs here, and now it's also calculated our energy use and emissions for those buildings. And we've got our capital and maintenance costs for the services, for the infrastructure. We've got transportation inputs, the kilometers traveled, and the energy use and the associated emissions. And we've got our revenue. And then down below, we've got a whole list of the assumptions and references that the tool is using behind the scenes and links so that you can go and look up in more detail any of those references. And we've got the emission factors for the calculating the emissions from energy usage and the global warming potential. The next worksheet we have is a scenario summary. And so right now we've got one scenario and it's showing here in column C. And as we start adding more scenarios, we'll get more, more columns added to this summary table. And finally, we've also got a charts worksheet, but it's not too interesting right now yet because we've got just one scenario in here. So there's nothing to compare. If I go back to the dashboard here, so I can see that the basic information of the scenario we just built. And in this menu, I can also go and edit it. But what I actually want to do is I'm going to duplicate that so we don't have to fill in all of those same settings again. And I'm going to tweak some settings. Let's go ahead and make a duplicate of that. And we're going to call this low density, but instead of baseline, let's do low density efficient homes. And we're going to change that. Instead of just the baseline building code, we'll do passive house building code. So we're still in Ontario. We're still going to use everything else the same. And I'm just going to click next and go through and find the parts that I want to change here. So I'm going to still keep 300 single detached homes, but I'm going to change the energy code to passive house. And I'm going to click next. And I'm going to, again, keep the same services. We'll keep everything the same except for the building code. So I will save that to the worksheet. And so now we've got, we've still got our low density baseline scenario. We've got our low density efficient homes. And if I look at the summary now, I've got 2 columns of scenarios. And if I look at the charts, now we can start to see, well, we changed the building code and now we're using less energy and we're producing less emissions. But other than that, we did all the same infrastructure and services. So as we'd expect, all of our associated costs are going to be the same. Okay, so we've got two scenarios there. Let's look at something a bit different. Why don't we try a transit-oriented design scenario? So I'm going to enter another new scenario. Transit-oriented design with diesel rapid buses. And enter whatever description we want. And for comparison, we'll just stick with Ontario. So we're comparing the same, everything else the same. And we'll go transit-oriented design, version 1. Okay, so in transit-oriented design, we don't just have single detached. We've also got row houses and apartments. And in my case, I want to just build row houses. Now there's a little item here. We're going to work on improving the tool, and in the next update, it'll come out. I actually can't enter 0 here. So I'm going to put it on 1 for a single detached. And let me see. So we're gonna keep doing this as passive house. So we're gonna basically build on the low density efficient homes, but now we're talking transit oriented design and still efficient homes. So we'll keep it as passive house. Our energy source is going to be grid electricity. Oh, that reminds me, I might have to go and edit the other one because I kept the natural gas in there. I think we're going to do 100% grid electricity here. So we've got one single detached. I am going to do 300 row houses. Again, passive house, energy source, grid electricity, 100%. And just one apartment. Somebody's got a secondary suite, I guess. We've got passive house and grid electricity, 100%. Next, I'm going to again stick with all of the same defaults for services. Roads, I think we're probably going to need a few less roads here for transit-oriented design. Let's say we're going to do 0 2-lane, but we're going to do 2,000 meters of 4-lane. And we'll keep the same defaults for sidewalk. Bike lane, we could add some bike lane, and water and wastewater adds up to the same amount of road. That makes sense to me. So I'll go next. We've got how much personal use vehicles we're using, and I'll stick with the defaults here of 14,000 VKTs. We'll put the same mix of gas and electric vehicles. 95% gasoline and 5% grid electricity. But now we're also going to add some buses. So let's put diesel buses here. And now here's something interesting again on the tool and improvement we're working on. This wants to know how many VKT per dwelling. But in this case, if I left it at 4,000, it's going to that's like saying that we're driving a like single bus 4,000 kilometers for every single dwelling, but so it's not taking into effect ridership. So let's take into effect ridership and assume that we have something like 40 people on each bus. That would give us more like 100 BK, like a bus is traveling 100 kilometers times 40 people per dwelling, that would add up to our 4,000. And the energy source is going to be diesel fuel. We could also put in some active transport, walking, some biking. Next. And then development charges, we'll put the same as we had in the low density. We'll put the same taxes. $3,000 per dwelling per year, and I'll save that to the worksheet. So now we've got 3 different scenarios here. If I look at the summary, now I think as I was talking through that last one, I realized there was something I should have changed in the low density efficient homes. All I did was change the building code to passive house, but we should have also changed the energy sources to be all electric heating too. So I'm going to go and edit that, and I'm just going to hit next here. And I'm going to go and change these energy sources. I'm going to delete the natural gas and put 100% grid electricity, heat pumps all the way. And keep everything else the same, save to worksheet. Okay, so we've got 3 scenarios here. Let's take this transit-oriented design a step further. So I'm going to duplicate that one. And instead of diesel rapid buses, let's say we want to change that to hydrogen trains. So next, I'm going to keep all of the buildings the same here. I'm going to keep the services the same. I'm going to keep the infrastructure the same. Personal use vehicles, but in transit, rather than 100 VKTs and diesel, I'm going to change this to 50 VKTs, and I'm going to change it to hydrogen instead. So we'll get rid of the diesel, put 100% hydrogen. Next, and we'll keep all the same development charges. Save. So now we've got 4 different scenarios, and if I look here, now we're starting to get some interesting things we can compare, and we can really see that on the charts. So looking at the energy, so on these charts we've got both the totals and then the per dwelling amounts. So we can see our energy use is steadily going down. Our emissions are going down. Our capital costs are pretty much the same because we're installing the same amount of services. Our infrastructure is pretty similar. And our development charges are also pretty similar because we're doing basically the same number of units and the same amount of revenue coming in per unit. We've got a bit of a difference in the vehicle kilometers traveled. We've got less vehicle kilometers in the transit oriented, and obviously much more transit kilometers. There's zero for the low density ones. So I think if we still have time that we could get into one more comparison. Let's take a look at an urban infill. So I'm going to build one more new scenario here, and we're going to call this urban infill. So this will be a mix of active transportation. We've got renewable transit. We'll do passive design, all the good things. And so we'll go again, Ontario, keep all of our comparisons the same year build out, and we'll go urban infill. Okay, so here I'm gonna put it back though to the so we get the same number of 300 units that we're comparing in the other scenarios. So to do that, let's say we've got 20 row houses. We're going to do these to passive house. We're going to do these all grid electricity. You'll notice as you're going along too, or as I'm going along, the tool requires you to provide valid inputs. So, I can't go over 100% or I can't go negative. So it helps out with error checking like that. In the apartments, so if I do 20 row houses, let's do 280 apartments. Again, a passive house. And again, we'll go all grid electricity. And services, let's again stick with our defaults. And road, maybe we need just a token amount of road, a cul-de-sac or something to go to a new apartment building we're putting in. We'll leave it as 0 4-lane roads. Let's keep some bike lane, and we can change that water pipe to 200, wastewater 200. We could keep our same defaults for the personal use vehicles, and you might notice these defaults are changing depending on the neighborhood archetype we've been selecting. So this default's different from the low density one we first had. But we'll still say we've got a mix of people that has some personal use vehicles. But now we're going to do, we've got a bunch more transit happening, and let's stick with our hydrogen trains. But again, this number needs to be corrected because that's much higher than, it's not accounting for ridership. So let's change that to 60 VKTs per dwelling. We could put in some active transport. And again, our development charges and our property taxes. And I'll save that. So now if I go to summary charts, we've got 5 different scenarios here. And I want to do one final one. Let's take urban infill, but let's bump up the density. So again, I'm going to go here and I'm going to duplicate the last one I had. Urban infill, let's call it higher density urban infill. Let's go double the density of what we had. So instead of 20 row houses, we'll go 40. Instead of 280 apartments, we'll go 560. And we'll keep everything else the same. And there we go. So we've just gone through and created 6 different scenarios where we're playing with slightly different levers on each one. And if I go to, so here's our scenario summary. You can see we've got them all here now beside each other. And in the charts, there's, we can maybe see a little more interesting stuff to look at. For example, if we look at the high density one, our last one in green compared to the other urban infill, now all of a sudden our energy is up substantially, but that's because we have twice as many people there. If we look per dwelling, it's still the same as our original urban infill. Our emissions are higher, but again, per dwelling, they're down. And if we go down particularly to some of the revenue, we've got considerably more revenue because we've got twice the units in there. So those are some really high level, quick examples of some of the things that we could build scenarios about and do some comparisons with. And I think that's what I've got for presenting, basically using the tool.
Thank you, Noah. That's a great overview. and certainly some interesting findings to explore. We've been answering a few questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any in the Q&A box specifically. So at this time, I really invite folks, if you've got questions or a scenario that you're curious about, if you're able to share that or post in the Q&A box, we certainly have some time to explore questions that are coming in. While you're thinking of those questions, typing in those questions, maybe I'll kickstart with a question for you both, Jeremy and Noah, and that is, I guess at a high level, what's your dream for this tool? How would you like to see communities use it? Have you been working with any communities? How have they used the tool? Maybe offer us a little bit more on what your visions are, thoughts are, dreams are of the tool's use.
They're quite lofty, I assure you. I think, I mean, really what we heard when we were, talking to a lot of municipalities that we work with is that I think intuitively there's an understanding that, you know, building low density suburbs is more energy consuming, more embodied carbon, uh, more emissions producing type of land use than an infill project of a similar size or typically greater size because you can achieve greater densities with infill projects would be. But that intuitive knowledge was often not enough to justify certain decisions being made. And it was often not enough to go to a council when there's a development proposal and present alternatives to council. So that's kind of what I would like to see this tool used for is, for municipal staff, for county or regional staff to be able to do these kind of high level assessments of developments, of development areas that are being proposed or specific developments that are being proposed and run the scenarios so that they can see, what the energy demand is going to be, what the emissions production is going to be between the scenarios, and what the cost to the municipalities will be ongoingly to the scenarios. I think that's another thing that we kind of understand intuitively that, we're building more infrastructure. It's going to cost more to maintain it and operate it. But by how much is the the critical detail that this tool is helping to give us. So I'm hoping that staff can use this tool to direct responsible and smart development decisions.
Thanks, Jeremy. And have you used it in any municipalities, even as pilot? There's the one question here in the chat to that effect.
I guess we haven't used it in the sense of there's a particular development being proposed and let's run the scenarios on it and then use the outputs of the tool to inform the final decision on that development scenario. We've more used it in just kind of an experimental sense in terms of, the municipalities kind of considering uh, designating growth areas and that sort of thing. But that's kind of what we're hoping to do next is working with some municipalities in using this tool for actual decision making.
Great. And we actually have a great response here from Jillian saying that they recently used the tool to evaluate the reality of last several years of growth versus a sprawl lower density scenario to show the benefits of densification and infill. So fantastic. That's exactly the kind of use I think we're trying to inspire with the tool, Jillian. So thank you for sharing that.
I think one thing that's maybe important to point out, I mean, we only had a short amount of time today to demonstrate what the tool can do. I think as you explore the tool and you explore the different assumptions, the different inputs, you can make more realistic scenarios. So, for example, we kept all the service costs constant across all the scenarios. We kept all of the development charges and taxes, property taxes constant across all the scenarios. Those, of course, would be pretty different between like an urban infill scenario, a transit-oriented development scenario, and a suburban scenario. So you would see these like vastly different, I think, municipal revenues, for example, between different scenarios as you're accommodating different numbers of homes in different types of land uses. So really, it's beneficial to experiment with the tool, understand the inputs that it's requesting of you, and how those inputs will generate different outputs in the scenario outputs. And so it's interesting to kind of experiment with that and be as realistic as you can for your municipal particular assumptions that you would put in.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. There's one question coming through with regards to a average GHG rate for sort of low density development project, and I wonder if we can maybe we can't go right back. I realize we swapped screen views, so we can't go back to the table to sort of show the first example. But I think if you run through the example with the baselines, then you'll see what that average GHG rate is based on current standards. I don't know, Jeremy, if you've got another response to that question.
Yeah, I don't have the actual number off the top of my
Yeah.
head, but yeah, I mean, for the different land use archetypes, well, it's more for the housing archetypes that we have in the tool. There's an average area associated with each of the homes and an average energy use and emissions associated with each of the home types. So all of that information is in the tool. The tool's open source essentially. There's no kind of black box calculations or assumptions going on in there, so you can dig into it. You can look at all of these values if you're so inclined.
Great. Thank you. There's also a question coming in on sort of best practices and land use plans in Canada. I mean, I think that's a bigger picture question. I really think the tool itself can help model some of those best practices, specifically with regards to kind of balancing those financial and energy efficiency kind of benefits. But do you any thoughts or reactions to that?
Well, I think, I mean, if you're tuned into FCM publications or SSG's work, or kind of any responsible planning firms or cities work, you'll see that greenfield development is it should be off the table at this point. Essentially, that there's very few good arguments to do greenfield development. There's a lot of argument to develop what is commonly referred to as compact complete communities, so that we're infilling kind of old industrial lands, brownfields, parking lots, etc., with housing and amenities, so that you have these complete communities. They're walkable, they're serviced by transit, they're low energy, low emissions, and that is really the direction that cities using smart planning decisions are going toward.
Yeah. And I think that one, even through the models you shared with us today, this tool is able to help us present that business case in a way that we haven't been able to before as well. There's another question around the scale of development that this tool works best at, and I'm sort of thinking immediately. My thought is at that neighborhood level, but what more would you add with regards to scale?
Yeah, good question. I would say, if you're wanting it to assess very small developments, like just a few homes type of thing, it's probably not super useful for that. I think it arguably can be used at that scale, but I think it's more, in the dozens, hundreds, thousands of housing units level of application. Uh, the the tool is kind of linear in that sense, and that you can use any scale of development or number of homes being developed. But yeah, I think that getting too big. It's kind of there's different considerations that would go into your infrastructure assumptions, your land use assumptions. So it's probably somewhere between the dozens of homes and the thousands of homes kind of spectrum.
Great. Thank you. And then another really great question with regards to who on staff in municipalities and local governments would be likely to use this tool, given the different kind of staffing skill sets that exist across the different municipal sizes. I mean, immediately I know of one community who's looking to use it in their planning department and sort of exploring some of those planning growth scenarios that the community is looking at. Who else would you say would be likely to use this tool?
Yeah, so this and a few other tools that SSG has developed are really aimed at urban planners, so planning department staff, development staff. Sometimes it's building code staff. Um, for this tool, you will likely need inputs from a few different departments in a municipal government. So, it could be the urban planning staff is using it to inform an official community plan or something like that. But they will likely need to go to like building department, transportation department, and get a few of those inputs. So, you can use it just using the defaults, and it will do a relatively good job. Just kind of assessing things using some of the defaults. But if you want more precise outputs, getting those assumption inputs from the other departments is important.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you so much, Noah, for walking us through the use of the tool, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As we sign off today, you'll each be invited to complete our webinar poll. Please do tell us how you liked the webinar today and help us tailor our content so that it's most valuable to you. It's anonymous, it's super quick. And as we come to a close, a reminder to make sure that you connect with us. We invite you to explore our Green Municipal Fund funding offers available in our Net Zero Acceleration Program and our other funding offers available on the Green Municipal Fund website. We also invite you to register for our upcoming Sustainable Communities Conference being held in February in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Registration is open. Program details are available on our conference website, and we hope to see you there. Again, thank you everyone so much for your time this afternoon. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Noah, for your contributions and your work in building this fabulous tool. And to all of you, please let us know how you've used the tool, what you found, and any kind of inputs and suggestions on how we can improve the tool for the future use. So thank you all again. Have a great afternoon, and we'll hopefully see you in Fredericton in February.